All right, we are now recording. Hello, everyone. Um, Welcome to all of you to the College Democrats at Eckerd College Let's Talk About Anti-Asian Racism event. This is the most excellent turnout we have ever had at an event that I can recall. I'm Alexa Shine. I'm the president of this club. And we're going to start out our meeting by having Audrey introduce a very important member of the St. Pete community. And then we are going to move on to our panel of 4 excellent students that volunteered to talk about this issue. So Audrey, would you like to introduce our guest?
I would love to. So hello, everyone. I'm Audrey. So thanks so much for all of you for being here. I know a lot of us are feeling a lot of different things. I know we're all sort of grieving for Atlanta and Boulder and all of our Asian American brothers and sisters all over. And I think here in Eckerd, here in St. Pete in general, we all feel that grief, or maybe, I don't know, despair and anger. I've been feeling all sorts of things about this. But seeing all of you here and looking at our amazing guest speakers today, I feel so much hope and just love for all of you. So I just wanted to say that real quick. But our first speaker is a 2-term councilwoman from District 4, a St. Pete local, and an Eckerd alum, fun fact, and a progressive Democrat running to be our next mayor. She started off in public service working with the Sierra Club, a nonprofit environmental organization. Then as city councilwoman, she has been a staunch proponent of taking care of our environment, racial equity, LGBT equality, affordable housing. Fun fact, she's also to thank for our curbside recycling program here in St. Pete, so that's awesome. And so, yeah, without further ado, Councilwoman Darden Rice.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Audrey. Can everybody hear me okay? Great, thank you. And thank you, Audrey, and thank you, Alexa. It's really great to be here tonight. I love Eckerd. I am from an Eckerd family. I'm an alum, and my mother-in-law is Joan Epstein, who is the director of the music department still there at Eckerd. I would guess maybe a few of you on the call tonight might have Joan for a class or will have Joan for a class. And both of my sister-in-laws are alums of Eckerd College. So being back at Eckerd sometimes just feels like home. And I'm really excited to see the number of people on this call tonight. I'm so glad and so proud of you guys for raising the issue of how we have to fight racism wherever we find it, and especially what we've dealt with recently. And so in such a sad situation with what happened in Atlanta with the violence against Asian people. So thank you for everything you're doing to raise awareness on campus for that. So I'm Darden Rice, and I'm running for mayor. I'm finishing up 2 terms on city council. It's work I love. It's work. It's been so important to serve my own community, and I'm ready to take the next step and serve you as mayor. Our current mayor is termed out, and I'll be finishing up my 2 terms on council. So I can tell you, no one else has the experience that I do to continue to run the city and keep us headed in the progressive direction that we're in. And also to address some of the very serious issues our city faces, whether that's ending racism, affordable housing, or the existential threats of climate change, and figuring out how and where and what to build in a coastal city that's on a peninsula, on a state that is basically, geologically speaking, a giant sandbar. And since Eckerd is on the water as well, I know that climate issues and resiliency are real important topics for the campus as well. Eckerd was a really important place to me. I did start off at USF Tampa in the beginning. I was a student activist with the Florida Public Interest Research Group. I took a little bit of time off and then finished up at Eckerd. I was really proud as a city council member in the last couple of years to sign a letter supporting the public interest research group at Eckerd. So I got my start, like when I was your age, I got my start in student activism, registering fellow students to vote. I worked on protecting our coast from the danger of dirty oil and gas drilling off our shores, a fight we're still fighting. And we worked on hunger and homelessness issues on campus. And we also worked on some consumer rights issues, such as I worked on the used car lemon law. So a lot of college students buy used cars, and you have to buy them as is. So when you roll them off the lot, if there's anything that goes wrong, you're stuck with a lemon. So we fought for all these good environment, good government, clean environment, and consumer rights issues, and cut my teeth on that student activism. And it was something I just took with me the rest of my life. It was very impactful. So we're running a great campaign. Audrey can tell you, we have a really strong campaign as a leading progressive candidate. We have some big issues facing us in St. Pete. Some of you may be very familiar with. For the last year, our whole nation has been awash in conversations about racism and fairness. And as a mayor of a major city in Florida, I can tell you my number one priority will be fighting racism wherever we see it, and not tolerating any bit of racism in any corner of our city or our police department or anywhere. And we're certainly starting to learn more about how to talk about the importance of anti-racism and understanding implicit bias and understanding why we must tear down structural racism, because it's what's best for everybody. And a city like St. Pete that embraces equity will only learn to be a much stronger city. And those are some of the challenges of modern leadership. We also know affordable housing is a big issue. And of course, the environment is something that I bring a great deal of strength to. I've worked for years on climate change and clean water issues, and I will certainly work to keep up our infrastructure and keep up our maintenance and replacing our, whether it's our stormwater system, our wastewater collection, our seawalls. That is a real important thing that we have to focus on as a coastal city. And we've seen what happens when you ignore it, or if you kick the can down the road, which is not going to happen with me. So I would love to hear any questions. I really would invite you and just totally welcome you with open arms to get more involved with the campaign, register fellow students to vote here in St. Petersburg. Oops, there's my cat. That's Gracie. Get involved, volunteer. We have an awesome grassroots campaign where we're getting out, talking to voters, knocking on doors safely, calling people. Hopefully this summer we'll be doing more in-person events. And we're going to keep up the pressure to elect me. I will certainly be one of our city's most progressive, forward-thinking mayors. I'll be our first woman mayor in almost 40 years since our strong mayor form of government. I'll certainly be our first openly gay mayor, and we're going to wear that with pride. It's not why I'm running, and it's not why I'm asking you to vote for me, but I know it's important to a lot of people. And I share that with you because people just want to know more about me as a candidate. I have an awesome wife, Eve, who's a St. Pete native, and she didn't graduate from Eckerd, but the rest of her family did. So we'll give her a pass. All right. But thank you so much for having me here. And I'd love to hear any questions from anyone on the call. And thank you again, Audrey. Thanks, Alexa.
All right, so it looks like we just had a website dropped into the chat for everyone that wants to get involved with this campaign. Also, we can contact Megan or Audrey about it. I'm sure they would be overjoyed to get you involved with this campaign. And I can say with almost complete confidence that for those of you around in the summer and for those of us come the fall, that we will be getting involved in the mayor's race. So getting a head start on that is only better for us.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Alexa. And let me just say this. When I was younger, and I didn't come out till I was 24. When I was younger, I didn't see anyone who looked like me in, okay, Gracie. I didn't see anyone who looked like me in elective office. And I was an activist. I was certainly very involved. But I never thought to myself for the longest time that I could ever run for office. I thought that's what other people did. And so I just want to say to anyone here on the call tonight, if you're thinking about running, you're already a leader if you're on this call. And we need leaders. We need more women in politics, not just as candidates, but also as campaign managers, as consultants. We need women in the front of the house and also in the back of the house. It makes a huge difference with our politics. The more that we get minorities and women involved and young progressive people involved really do change local politics and elections. And we really need to hear from you. And I'd love to see Eckerd turn out as a huge voting bloc of younger voters and really just send ripples of change throughout the city. St. Pete's the biggest city in Pinellas County, and Tampa Bay as a region is a very important political region. We're an anchor of the I-4 corridor. When Tampa Bay goes progressive, the state goes progressive. So everyone here is doing something very important. And if anyone ever wants to talk to me more about the nuts and bolts of running a campaign or running for office, I would be so happy to sit down and talk with you, because I'm telling you, I'm inspired by you and I know our future depends on it. So I hope to see you on the campaign trail and look forward to seeing a lot more of you on my campaign, hopefully. And thank you so much for having me here tonight. And you can go to dardenrice.com. And we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and check us out.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for taking time out of your night to come talk to us.
You got it. Thank you. And this, okay, I have to do my part. This
Cat
is
show off.
Gracie.
Yeah.
This is Gracie, who wants to say hello, and then we'll let her go. All right. Good night, guys.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
a lot.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Real quick, I also wanted to note that she has a puppy named Ruthie Barker Ginsburg.
That
Isn't that cute?
much is very valuable information.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much to Darden for speaking.
All right. So let's move to the theme of our night, which is discussing anti-Asian racism throughout the United States, as well as at Eckerd. We have 4 incredible people here who stepped forward to come talk about their own experiences and subjects within this that they feel very strongly about. We have Kate Umakubo, we have May Keller, Annie Baumgardner, and we have Meher Datta, who will, occasionally known as Nemo, who will be joining us tonight. To give a brief spiel about some themes in anti-Asian American history before the people that actually know what they're talking about get started. Since the 1800s, the United States has not been very welcoming to Asian immigrants. We had legislation like the Chinese Exclusion Act, which was specifically to prevent Chinese people from immigrating on the West Coast. And we had later iterations of that expanded to prevent all Asians and not just Chinese to come in. We had some legislation specifically to prevent Asian women from coming in because of stereotypes about them. And especially in recent history, we've seen a lot of popular thought about Asians and Asian women coming from the fact that when the United States got involved in military affairs in Asia, be it the Vietnam War, the Korean War, or the Pacific Theater of World War II, they often saw and used Asian women solely for companionship, which I'm sure we all know what that means, and then came back to the United States with those views, informing their actions going forward. And anti-Asian sentiment isn't just a creation of the United States. There's a long history of the West viewing Asia as the Orient and exoticizing them, their culture and their people and their religion through Orientalism. And we can see traces of that today, not just in your, direct violence or your direct racist acts, but also in the fetishization of various aspects of Asian culture and media. I think very obviously we can see that through K-pop, fetishization of K-pop being like a direct line from the exotic Asia to people being obsessed with the entertainment of East Asia nowadays. And with that spiel over, I would like to hand my soapbox off to Kate. And when you guys all start talking, would you please introduce yourselves and say anything relevant about your background that you think would add to this conversation before you get into the subject you'd like to talk about. Thank you so much. I'm going to shut up now.
Okay, hi, I'm Kate Makubo. I don't know. Alexa asked me to speak here tonight, and so I said sure. I'm going to speak about I'm half Japanese, so I'm half Asian. And I'm going to speak about Japanese internment camps. I realize that's a little more of a history lesson than and less recent, but I think it's important to recognize that discrimination and anti-Asian sentiments are not just a recent occurrence, that they have persisted through America for a very, very long time. Alexa said, like, since the 1800s, and there have been several different legislative things that, what's the word, like, proliferate that. So I think I have a little PowerPoint, and I cannot share my screen, and that is okay.
I can fix that for you.
Okay, if not, it's not a big deal.
Because I want you guys to be able to present how you want to present. All right, somebody already made you co-host. So.
Aha, oh, okay, got it. Here is my presentation. Can y'all see this? Yes, all right, solid. Okay. All right, Japanese internment camps. So as we know, bombing of Pearl Harbor happened beginning of December. About mid-February, President Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066, and this created a militarization zone, which you can see on the West Coast here in red. And that instructed anyone of Japanese ancestry in this area to be relocated to 10 different relocation camps. You also hear them referred to as internment camps, concentration camps. And this was really hard on the West Coast Japanese people. They had only a couple of days to kind of get their affairs in order. So selling their houses or having someone take care of it, selling businesses. stuff like that. There was an option to either move to relocation camp or just move east, but that was not really an option for a lot of people because their whole livelihoods and homes and families were on the West Coast. So from there, anyone who was staying was moved to assembly centers while the camps were still being built. And you can see that's the like little dots, and then all of the different internment camps are the big triangles. So a couple of terms that I just might mention are Issei, which are the first generation immigrants who came from Japan. Nisei would be their children, so it'd be like second generation firstborn Americans. And Kibe are usually Nisei who go back to Japan for schooling, but a lot ended up coming back right in time for World War II to be sent to camps. Like my Jichan, my grandfather was Kibe. He attended school in Japan, but he came back and then he got sent to camps. And you can see here in this picture, families were given these tags that had like a number on them. And so they'd attach it to like their coats and stuff and all of their luggage, because you'd get like whatever you could carry is what you could bring to camp. And so then all their stuff would get thrown in a train and you'd get sent to wherever they decided to send you. So obviously I wasn't in camp because that's, you know, a long time ago. Neither was my father, but my grandparents and my great aunts and uncles, they were all the generation that was in camp. And families were put into military-style barracks. And so think the size of your dorm room, essentially. An entire family would live in an area about that big. You can kind of see that's like this bottom picture. And then all the camps had barbed wire fences and guard towers that were manned by gunmen. And these gunmen, of course, were facing in, not out. So camp life was pretty interesting. At some point, the military handed adults a loyalty questionnaire, and it was mostly for the Nisei, but all adults took it, especially adult men. And on this questionnaire were two questions that caused a lot of controversy, questions 27 and 28. 27 basically asked if you would serve in the US military, and 28 asked if you would renounce the Japanese emperor. And this caused a lot of conflict, especially for Issei, because they didn't have American citizenship like their children, but if they renounced their Japanese citizenship, then they'd be stateless. So if you answered no to both of these questions, you were deemed a no-no boy. And this was, you were seen as disloyal, and this was a very stigmatized title to have. And all the no-no boys were eventually moved to Tule Lake, which is in California, just so they can kind of all be in one place, and the military can kind of just keep an eye on them, essentially. One of my grandfathers was a no-no boy, so like that was really hard, and he didn't really talk about it. So yeah. And then my other grandfather did go to Manzanar, which is another camp in California. Heart Mountain is this top picture. My grandmother was there. And Tule Lake is this bottom picture. All of the camps, most of the camps, excuse me, do have museums, kind of where they're at. Like my family and I did make it out to Heart Mountain, and we walked around the camp, or whatever parts of it were left. There was a museum there. It was really interesting to see, because they have a lot of records also, and we were able to find my grandmother and her family in these records. And all of the camps have, you can find them on the National Park Service, as they are designated as usually a historical landmark or historical site. And then at the end of the war, the last camp was closed in 1946, and internees were given, I don't remember exactly how much money, not a lot, probably under $60, and a bus ticket. So like my grandparents ended up coming to Chicago, but a lot of people did stay in California. Um, in 1976, President Ford did repeal the executive order, and in 1988, Congress did formally apologize, and they created the Civil Liberties Act, which did award $20,000 to each individual that was interned at the camps. And then just some resources on Japanese internment. Two prolific photographers during the time, which I'm sure you guys have probably heard mentioned, is Dorothea Lange and Ansel Adams. Dorothea Lange, her photography was actually kept hidden in archives for a really long time and wasn't really discovered until like 2006. And but that's on display in several places. I think you can find it online. And Ansel Adams took pictures at Manzanar. This one picture is Dorothea's. One book that I did read a few years ago, which goes into a lot of detail and gives you a really good idea of what families are feeling, was Infamy by Richard Reeves. And then you can find information about any of the camps. If you just look them up, they usually have their own website, or you can look on the National Park Service, and Dento Encyclopedia gives you a lot of information as well as vocabulary also to talk about this. That is all I have. I'll stop sharing. But yeah, I just think it's important to acknowledge the fact that it was really hard for Japanese Americans and their parents who didn't necessarily have American citizenship to talk about their experiences after the war. I think that's part of why I personally didn't really learn about it in school. Obviously, I knew about it because I have this family history. I distinctly remember there being like a singular page about it in my history textbook in school. But it was really difficult because they didn't want to be seen as a burden or like they did anything wrong. And so it took years and years for anyone to really open up about their experiences. But I'm really grateful that they did. Yeah, I think that's all I got. If anyone has any questions or whatever.
Kate, thank you so much. Yeah, while the others volunteered, I did directly reach out to Kate because I knew she had this presentation on hand, and I was like, hey, come to this meeting. So maybe I'm being a bit disingenuous when I say that they all volunteered, but I think that was extremely important for us all to learn about. And I know that many of us can relate to not having learned about it in school or having barely learned about it in school. And so to learn more about this absolutely egregious part of American history is something that we should all keep in mind as a goal. I believe our next speaker is Annie. Annie, if you would like to begin your presentation and identify yourself, can we make sure that Annie is a co-host and we can be on our way?
Co-host, wow. Okay. Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. Hi, I'm Annie. If I stutter or it takes me a moment, please be patient. I am a little bit nervous. There's so many people. Cool fact that's a little bit kind of related. It's my gotcha day today, which is the day I was adopted. So that was really convenient. Thank you. No paparazzi. Anyways, to go and start this out, anyway, sorry. When I was 10 years old, this guy who I thought was my friend told me that he liked me, which was really cool. But then he then ended it with that he had yellow fever. I have no idea. I had no idea what that meant. And I, was trying to be polite about it, being like, thank you, that means a lot to me. And then everyone started to laugh at me. I was really embarrassed. I have no idea what I did. And I realized later on that they weren't laughing at me specifically. They were laughing about the fact that this guy brought up that I was Asian, which is not cool to do. And it was a really embarrassing conversation to go and have with my mom later that day. She picked me up from school. I remember, I was in aftercare, literally in aftercare. I was a child, and I had to go and say, what's yellow fever? Now, for those of you who may not know, yellow fever is something that is used for when men or women or non-binary, anyone really, have an inherent preference or specific desire or lust for people that are Asian, and it is seen because we are supposedly yellow. I don't really think I'm yellow, could be wrong. You know what? That could be something I haven't really brought up, but totally could be wrong. But it was so humiliating, and it doesn't stop there. In 4th grade, my class had a poll to see if I was white or black. I told them numerous times that I was actually Asian, and they said, no, I was black. So I don't know why I'm speaking if I'm black. That's for legal reasons a joke. Alexa laughed. Anyways, it didn't make me feel good. It made me feel terrible, and it made me confused because, for one thing, as I mentioned before, I am adopted. It's my gotcha day. I didn't exactly feel Asian. I didn't grow up in an Asian household. I grew up in a white Jewish household, actually. And it felt so weird that I was actually Asian. Like, it didn't connect to me. But so many people not only realized it before me, but instead actually targeted me because of this. Now, I unfortunately didn't have the desire to go and make a PowerPoint, mainly because right now I'm going to be talking about this kind of skewed image of Asian people, especially in the media, and the toxic positivity that comes around with that, as well as fetishization. Did I say that right? Thank you, Alexa. I was worried I said that wrong. So first, I'm going to go and start off with another story that I had. I was 13 years old. I was a tomboy, didn't wear a lot of skirts. I wore a skirt once, first time in about a decade. And I was 13, and before I went to an art gallery, and a man followed me the entire time. He followed me, asked me questions, stuff like that. I had no idea why. And then he finishes off with how exotic I am and how beautiful I am and how great I would look in so and so colors because of my skin. I had no idea what he meant. To this day, unfortunately, I still don't. If anyone has any ideas, please message me after this, because I would love to know why he would feel the need to say that. Almost every day of my middle school life, someone would go and tell me something to make me realize that I was different from them. From getting bangs, for example. I have bangs now, but I got bangs in middle school. And someone said, wow, you look so Asian. That made me feel terrible. It is a harmless comment, so to speak. Didn't really necessarily bring up anything negative about me, but it felt terrible, and it really put a divide between me and my peers. And for 6 years, I couldn't even look at bangs because I was so afraid that I would end up maybe getting them, or I would look too Asian. I didn't want to look Asian. I hated being Asian. And luckily for me, I'm not afraid of that anymore, but I was so afraid of being a target for these people again. It was terrifying. I remember also, sorry, I'm bringing up a lot of past stories, but I feel like they're so important to share because as much as this is history, this is also happening now. And the best sources that I can give you guys to show my validity in that I should be talking right now is because I've been through this. I remember in my class, one of my teachers asked me, what is something great about Eckerd? And my genuine first response was, it has been more than one day that I have not been commented about that I'm Asian. That to me was a field day. Men used to actually memorize my bus schedule and would follow me home from middle school to high school, to the point where I had to get a phone. My mom didn't want me to, but it became so bad because this one man specifically would follow me home, would try and follow me home. I would take some shortcuts and roundabouts, but it was terrifying because around that time, I didn't lose all my baby teeth. Isn't that nuts? Imagine little yous and you guys just being, trying to be cool, learning about puberty, saying, what's puberty? But that's neat. And this man who's already, put you down as some exotic girl that he's going to go and decide to take. It's scary. It's terrifying, in fact. Now, there's nothing wrong with preferences especially, with in romantic relationships or prospects. Nothing wrong with that at all. However, if your sole motivation to go and be with someone, or at least your first initial instant attraction to them is due to the fact that of their race, I personally find that very horrifying as someone who has only been known as yellow, and it has taken a long time for me to realize that that is not all who I am. I don't know how long I've been talking. I didn't know if there was a time check. If there is.
You usually get it 15 to 20 minutes, but we are actually ahead of schedule. So
Sweet. Sorry,
a
I have
little bit
no
longer.
perception of time, so I just didn't know. That is a lot about the fetishization. I hope the reason why I'm telling you all this is because I hope you guys can see how this isn't something that just happened recently in Georgia. This has been happening every day for some people like me, or maybe every other day, but it's still happening and it still makes a big impact on us. And I hope you guys, if you see something, maybe someone says, oh, that looks so Asian, or someone says something about someone's skin color and how lovely it is. Although it's a positive idea, it's extremely toxic to us. Literally last year, I went to the mall minding my business, and a woman brought a bird to the mall. And I was like, of course I have to talk to her. She brought a bird to the mall. That's psycho. And she said to me, quote, my bird's coloring looks great with your skin, unquote. We are in 2021. That was in 2020, which is bonkers. And it's unfortunately still happening. It's not happening as much anymore, thank God, but it's still a thing. And if you hear something that, yeah, it's should be seen as a compliment, but if you're pointing out someone's skin color or just something about them that is associated with a race, that's not always a compliment. I'm much more than the race that I was born with. I am humble, clearly. I'm clearly very modest, not egotistical. I have some of my friends say that I'm funny, some of them, not all of them. Others say that I'm smart. Others say that I'm a good cook. Not my mom. Mom does not think I'm a good cook, but those are some things you can go and compliment about me. It doesn't have to go and be about how great my skin color is, or how Asian I look with bangs, or how nice monolids must be. It doesn't have to always be about race. There are so many other things you can compliment about others. And I hope, thanks, Julia. Oh, you. And I hope that, maybe if you have done this, that's okay too, as long as you understand that it's not acceptable anymore. I used to unfortunately go into this stereotype. I used to make jokes about me being Asian. I hated doing that, but it was the only way to fit in, or whatever the heck the cool kids are saying. And it's not cool. It's not funny. And I wish I could tell younger me that. But now I'm telling older us that. So I hope that you guys have learned something. If you guys want to go and talk about this more, would love to talk about Asian problems or maybe horoscopes. later. And if you guys have any questions during the question time, I would love to. I'm a Cancer. No one ever thinks I'm a Cancer. I don't know why. But yeah, I would love to go and talk about this during question time or discussions or any other time. I can put my Instagram if anyone would love to go and chat with me more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Annie. I am very glad you were able to make that presentation. However, all of the examples you gave were horrific. So I'm glad you had things to talk about. I'm not glad that you had things to talk about. We are halfway through our speakers, so I'm going to make a couple of super fast plugs. Mel, if you want to drop the survey link into the chat again. Everyone who's here, please fill this out. I'm going to drop the Slack link into here. If you want to get involved in College Democrats or Florida College Democrats, please fill it out, or I mean, please follow the link. Finally, if you want to be on the Eckerd College Democrats board, message us at our Eckerd College Dems Instagram, and we can talk about it. So now that that's out of the way, we can move on to our next speaker, May Keller. Take it away.
Hello, my name is May. I am also an Asian American adoptee, or actually a Chinese American adoptee. Yeah, and I was born in Anqing, China, of the Anhui province. If anyone like knows Chinese geography, probably not. It's fine. Anyway, here, am I the co-host?
Yeah, you're all set.
Okay, cool. Yes. Share the screen. Oh. All right, here, let me present it. Okay. Hello. These are some musings from an Asian American adoptee. By me. So first, I want to give some background for some terms I might use through this whole thing. The first one is something called the primal wound, which is a theory made by a psychologist that a primal wound is formed when a child is separated from their birth mother. So like the physiological connection between the child and the mother is broken. So like children, like even though they are still so small, they still understand or like know that their needs need to be met, and that like they have like this connection to like their mother, or like this caretaker in some sense. And then when a child is given up for adoption, that is broken, and it can cause some issues later on in life. And the thing is with the primal wound is that it is never fully able to heal. Like it's like grief. It's so like the next point is, does that mean all adoptees are grieving? And you see, this is controversial, and of course this is also my opinion, but I've also done a ton of studies about, or just read a ton of studies about like adoption and then transracial adoption, which I'll go into next. But anyway, and a lot of them may not be actively thinking like oh, I'm grieving, but like even they're just like small like things that like are like indicative of like trauma, even when they're like really young. Like for instance, when like with many of the adoptees I've met, including myself, when we are first, when like we were given food by our adopted parents, our first instinct was to just scarf it down because we were worried that it was going to be like taken away, you know, because we didn't always have access to food or care as like the same as like people who aren't adoptees. And like, I don't know, it's a bit controversial because some adoptees are okay with being adopted, you know, and that's great. Like, that's awesome. I'm not gonna like invalidate their experience at all. It's just that there could, with other people, like it's also like based on how people respond to trauma, and everybody responds to trauma differently. So for one person it may be like very, very big, and the fact that they are adopted is very, very, it like impacts a lot of their life, and then for another person it doesn't as much. And both experiences in like as an adoptee are completely valid. And so in the next point, the next word is transracial in reference to adoption. So in reference to adoption, a transracial adoption is when a parent or parents of one racial group adopt a child from another racial group. And this doesn't have to just be like white people adopting like a non-white baby. It could be even like Asian parents adopting a Black baby. It could be Latino. Well, that's more anyway. Yeah, sorry. Here's the point. Anyway, and then there's the white savior complex, which is, I feel like a lot of people know this, but if you don't, then here it is. When a white person provides help to non-white people in a self-serving manner, it's really common. Like you'll hear stuff about like when people like, well, when white people go on these like trips to Africa and they like, you know, they're just like, oh, I'm transforming lives, and like they spend like a week and they're like kind of like playing with like orphans at an orphanage, and then like the white people just go up and go back to their homes, and they're just like, wow, it's such a transformative experience. But what did those people actually do to help that community? You know, you're there for a week and then you leave. Like, it's just a little problematic. But then the white savior complex comes up in adoption too. It's when white adopters adopt a non-white child to save the child from its home country. So like to save it from the conditions, or to save it from poverty, or to save it from them like staying orphans for a really long time, and then they end up like being kicked out onto the street and being homeless. So yeah. So here are some problems with adoption. So there's a lack of understanding for an adopted child's needs. Many adopted children, you know, like I already mentioned the thing about food and how resources are kind of limited. A lot of us also, like when we are younger, we have issues with like personal touch or like physical affection because we weren't always like held, you know, like how like a birth parent would like hold their baby, you know, if that makes sense. Okay, evolutionarily, like humans have one child at a time because of their like the extended childhood of humans. And so we're humans like evolutionarily are grown up to like be like, oh yes, okay, I am connected to this birth mom. And then when that is no longer there, they're just so many issues can arise. Anyway, so, and then there's also lack of knowledge of the primal wound. So a lot of adopters don't understand how there is an inherent grief within this child's life because they do not have their birth mother, they don't have their birth family, and it isn't taken into consideration like, oh, how will that affect my child later on, like, or like if it will, and like what to do if like it does affect them, like will we like get them therapy or anything like that typically isn't thought of by adopters. There's also the institutionalization of adoption. So adoption is actually a multi-million-dollar industry, which is really, I don't know, that makes, it just leaves like a bad feeling in my mouth. Like it just like, imagine like how can you like just like capitalize on the fact that there are like abandoned babies in the world, you know? And so then this is, I worded this a bit funny, sorry. But adoption is fundamentally is trading money for a child. Like, yes, there are a lot of things that you have to do. There's a ton of paperwork, there are home visits, there are interviews and all this stuff. But essentially, like, you can like pass all that if you were like kind of like as long as you like have enough space and have enough knowledge and do well in the interviews. And then you also have to have the money. And a lot of adopters, you know, there's a subconscious idea that like, oh, my adopted child is like my property, like I bought it. Like there are already issues with parents like projecting like their own ideas of what their child would be like on their like birth children. And then there's that, but it's even more magnified. Like for instance, in my family, sometimes my parents would act kind of entitled to my body. Like I was at one time at a doctor's visit and I was needing to change and I was like, hey mom, can you please leave? I'm 17, please don't stay here. And she got very, very offended. She was like, what? Like, no, I want to be here. Like, what? And I was like, no, I am uncomfortable with this. And she was extremely angry at me. And the only explanation that I could come up with was that like she saw me as not a human, but as an object, if that makes sense. And also the process is excessively similar to the adoption of a domesticated animals. This is just like a personal like kind of grievance I have. It's just like even the word Gotcha Day, which is celebrated. Like I celebrated my Gotcha Day for like many years. And then I also learned that same word Gotcha Day is used for when people adopt domesticated animals. So like if I adopted my dog, you know, on this certain day, I would celebrate that. But it's called the same thing and it's celebrated in a similar way. And that just leaves, I don't know, that just kind of rubs me the wrong way. And then there's also the loss of connection to family. So you have the loss of heritage and family traditions, and just, you know, you just don't have that. You're always left wondering of like, what could there be? Or like sometimes you're left wondering like, oh, what could have been, you know? And also many adoptees are from families of low socioeconomic status, meaning that, so the adoption industry preys on women who are of low socioeconomic status and are just like, you should give your child up for adoption, you know, like, and they'll word it in a sense of just like, oh, it'll be good, you'll be giving it a better life than it'll have like right now, you know, they'll be in a nice family and all this stuff, but they are wanting money. Like the babies are the product and they are generating revenue from them. And then there are problems with transracial adoption specifically too. So with transracial adoption, there are all those issues that I previously talked about adoption, but, and then just more of those. So typically, white parents will adopt a non-white child, and the child is typically from another country too. And that is because of a white savior complex. And it's also like international adoptions are also less difficult than domestic adoptions. Like the process is shorter. And like while that does like functionally like make sense, like, oh, I want a child now, it's still just like personally weird for me to think about, like, oh, the reason why my parents chose, or like some parents chose to adopt internationally is that they could get a child faster, rather than like thinking like, yes, like, sorry, this is a hard topic for me to talk about sometimes. But also there's the white savior complex, and I am very familiar with this. My parents actually adopted me because of a white savior complex. They attended a presentation about China, like like orphans in China and all this stuff, and they were shown images of how all these like Chinese girls are just in these orphanages, and they're just overflowing because of the preference for males in Chinese society and all this stuff. And my parents came out. Mom has told me this multiple times. She says that they came out with like tears in their eyes, and they looked at each other and said, "We have to save one of those. Like, we have to save one of those girls. We have to rescue them." And I personally don't like being seen as something that's needs saving or being rescued from. Like, that doesn't make me feel very good. And then also, many white adopters do not take the time to learn and understand racial discrimination from their child's point of view. So already, adopters typically do not try to understand like the adoptee's like mindset and how the adoption might affect them psychologically and mentally for the rest of their life. And then you add another layer of racial discrimination, because typically these non-white adoptees are taken to predominantly white countries and are just westernized countries. And so there's always been a ton of issues with racial discrimination, and the parents don't take the time to learn and understand that. They like to overlook that and like not see it, because they see their child as something to love. They see it as something more than their race, which is great, but that just leads to color blindness or color muteness, where, because there's still racism, there's still racist people out there. And the fact that the parents aren't taking the time to explain or learn about racial discrimination, and then teach it to their children, and like how to properly deal with it, and like just all the like how it is definitely wrong, it will be problematic for the child later on. And so then there's also a loss of like the racial culture and whitewashing. So when I was adopted, they even changed my name. My original name in Chinese is Mei Qi, and that was the name my birth mother gave me. And when my parents adopted me, they decided to change that and make it Sarah Elizabeth Keller. And that is my legal name, but not the name I was born with. And the only reason why they decided to change it was because it was more English friendly, if that makes sense. It's like a very like anglicized English name that many white people are just like, it's a very Americanized name. And so just even through that small change, just it strips a child of their identity in a sense, you know? Like, my birth mom gave me that name for a reason, and you're just gonna go and change it because now I am yours, if that makes sense. And then there are also illegal adoptions. this is a large issue. Especially, I've seen it mostly in African countries where there will be, you know, a woman of low socioeconomic status. She is approached by some higher person, or like sometimes it's like a priest, or like they say that they are like this important person, like at a boarding school that's like abroad or whatever, and they say that they will take the child and will like take care of them, and they'll be learning and they'll be in a really good environment, better than the one that they are currently in with their low socioeconomic status. And the parents are also, since they are of low socioeconomic status, pretty like sometimes fairly illiterate. And so they are given forms that they cannot read or understand. And they also, like, sometimes the forms are even in English. And like, of course, like some like Congolese like woman won't be able to read English, especially if she's of already low socioeconomic status. Why would she also learn English? Why would she know English? And so they just sign it, and then the child goes away forever. And then they're adopted out. And the parents get very upset about this. They learn that their children are gone. They've been adopted and are with a new family, and they can't see them. They can't talk to them anymore. Like, it's a very illegal thing, but it happens, and it's through agencies that parade themselves, like they'll like say like, oh yeah, we're like accredited, we're fine and good. So some like adopters don't even know that they're participating in these illegal adoptions. And then interracial adoption also has a very racist history in terms of Indigenous children in the Americas and Australia. Or in Australia, and just in Aboriginal communities, and even just like in the Pacific Islands, and then New Zealand, of course, too, where these Indigenous children were taken from their families and forced to assimilate into a Western lifestyle where they are like adopted by, white people who live in that nation. And then there's also like children at the border who have been separated from their parents, and then they end up being like adopted out somehow. Like it's still like confusing to me how that even happens. Like I just like, there's like a child at the border, and then like they're forcibly separated, and then they are just given away. Not like, sorry, adopted out, like not given away. But yeah, no, it's very troubling and very racist history, at least. And so here's some personal experiences. So as I said, I was a product of the white savior complex, and my parents never learned about issues in adoption and race, let alone transracial adoption. So it's actually really interesting. I was talking to my parents, and they said that my dad had to read a book and apparently write like a book report on it to be able to adopt me. And I asked what the book was about, thinking maybe it would be about an adopted family, or how to like adjust an adopted child to a new life. And he said that it was just about parenting, just in general, completely like removing the difference that like the change that the adopted child is going to have to go through, and like they have to like learn to live with, and that parents don't know that, and they can't help with that. And so I also lived in a predominantly white middle to upper class area. It's an area known actually in Georgia called East Cobb, and it's a really nice place if you really like the suburbs and really like white people, I guess. I don't know. But so I wasn't exposed to a lot of people who looked like me, or just even diversity in general. And when I did, like, there was a separation because of the whitewashing that I went through. Like, I was stripped from my culture. Like, even Annie said in her presentation, she didn't feel like she was Asian for the a majority of her life. And it wasn't until it was pointed out to her that she felt Asian. That's how it was for me too. I didn't fully understand or know what a oop, okay, cool. Sorry. I've received a message that I only have a few minutes left. I'm very sorry. I'm very long-winded, I guess. And so then there's also color blindness. So white parents will say like, oh yeah, well, we just won't talk about race because if we do, then the child will know like, oh, they're different than us. But the child is already gonna know. I remember seeing photos of my family and being like, wow, I'm really tan. I look a ton darker. My hair is a lot darker. I look kind of weird and different and I stand out. Which leads to internalized racism. I was very internalized. Like there's a lot of internalized racism when I was younger for myself. So I remember looking at a photo and like talking to my mom and being like, wow, I look really dark in here. I am orange. I look like an Oompa Loompa. And she didn't say like, oh no, like your skin color is still beautiful. Like she didn't take it very seriously. She took it as something like a kid would say offhand. And she was like, I know you don't, like you're beautiful or whatever. But like I still thought that same thought of I look different and I don't like that. And then also just beauty standards in general, already it's really hard for people of color to find people who look like them that are like seen as beautiful, and it's even harder, I think, for a, like transracial adoptees because they're also only surrounded by white people in their family. And so there's really no one that looks like them. And I also grew up in it's kind of embarrassing, and like I was emo when I was in middle school, and the beauty standards for that is very pale, very skinny, very white, and typically blue eyes. And so I realized that I had none of that, and I was just like, wow, I want to be truly emo. I want to like bleach my skin. I want to get double eyelid surgery. I want to always wear colored contacts that are blue so I can fully fit in as a white person. I already have a white name. I already have a white family. It'll be fine. And that's just also internalized racism too. So, and then there's also invalidation and personal fears of hate crimes. I did a lot of research in high school about anti-Asian sentiment in America, and I knew that hate crimes for Asian people were going to rise at some point. And I spoke about those fears to my parents, and they denied that. And they were just like, that would never happen. That would never happen. And then, with COVID, it's happened. And then also with with the shooting in Georgia. And actually, funny story, Sunday, this past Sunday, I talked to them about that. And it was just like, hey, yeah, how has Georgia been from like the hate crime that happened, And my parents were just like, oh, you mean like the shooting of the massage parlor? And I was just like, yeah. And my parents corrected me and said, well, actually, it wasn't a hate crime. And went on to explain why it wasn't a hate crime to me, an Asian American woman. And it really opened my eyes to a lot of things. And then there are alternatives to adoption, because a lot of people are just like, oh, well, if you don't like adoption, what should we do to change that? Or like to get rid of it? We should give proper access to birth control, access to abortions, put more money in the community so people of low socioeconomic status can afford to keep their children. We should try to destroy the industry of adoption, not necessarily adoption as a concept, because they're probably still going to be orphans. And then we should also listen to adoptees, which is a really big point, because a lot of adoptees will voice their concerns and gripes with the adopted, with adoption, and they will be invalidated. They'll be like, oh, well, you should be grateful you were saved, and then pushed aside, but yeah, no, we should be listened to. Sorry, that was very long. I speak a lot.
It's all right. It's all right. You had a lot to say. Thank you. And
Yeah,
you
thank you.
were one of the first people to come to me and you were like, hey, I want to talk about this. And I was like, all right, let's go. And when you were talking about the issues with racism and adoption, it reminded me of something that I talk about in my sociology class, which is if you take a baby from another culture and you bring it to the U.S. and you raise it, as an American or as a white, upper middle class American, it may receive the same education, it may receive the same social messages, but the people around the child are still going to see the child the way that they've been socialized to see, race. So
Mhm.
socialize the adopted child however you want. The rest of society is still socialized to see it as an other. And
Yeah.
that came up very strongly in what you were saying.
Mhm.
So thank you very much. And there will be discussion after this all. But let's hand the floor over to our final speaker. And do you have a presentation?
Nope.
Where is Nemo? Where's our final speaker? Hello. Take it away, my friend.
Hello. My name's Nemo. I'm one of Eckerd's 5 international students. I don't know if I have to specify this, but Nemo is not my real name. My mother didn't, give birth to me and think I'm gonna name her after the fish, especially since Finding Nemo didn't even come out until 3 years after I was born. But that is not my real name. My real name is Meher Datta, and I decided that I didn't want anybody to try and say my name when I came here, because I didn't want to be an inconvenience, I didn't want to be an inconvenience to my friends and stuff who might be put off by having to stumble around my name. And it's fine. I like being called Nemo, but I would like it better if if y'all can say Tchaikovsky, I think you can say Meher. But anyway, I'm also here to talk about anti-Asian racism. I'm from India, born and raised. India is usually excluded a lot from, talks about Asia and stuff. I remember one of the first few interactions I had with someone here was, I told them I was speaking to somebody at the pier, and they told me that I said I'm from India, I'm Asian, and they were like, "No, you're not." And I was like, "Huh? I'm sorry, I must have heard what?" And they were like, "Oh yeah, no, if you're from India, I would really consider you Asian." And I was like, "Oh, cool. I don't recall where I asked, but okay." So it's very easy to see Asians as a monolith because it's one of the, it is the biggest continent in the world. But we don't all look the same. We don't all act the same. We don't all, we have very, very different and very rich cultures. And I think we deserve celebration. Okay. So what I want to talk about today is education. Personally, I think that America's education system needs to be completely revamped, because private education is made too expensive and to cater only to rich white kids, because we all know that the system is specifically pitted against like POC communities in America. And so I think that's a really unfair thing that needs to change, because public education needs to be funded much better. Because I mean, of course, you're trying to give an education to the next generation and stuff like that. And I think curriculums themselves need to be so much more holistic. So besides a complete revamping of America's education system, you also need to have diversity in your classrooms. I've been to two educational institutions in my life. One was in India, where everybody, well, okay, both were in India. One was in my home city of Mumbai, and one was an international boarding school up in the Himalayas, up in the mountains. I learned so much more when I was at boarding school. I had roommates and friends from Syria, Israel, uh, South Korea, Australia. I had friends from everywhere. And ultimately, like, of course, my classroom education taught me a lot, but it was the experience of being lucky enough to be surrounded by so many people from so many different places that gave me a new appreciation for the culture, because now when I hear about what's going on in Syria and stuff, I just think about my roommate and my best friend, and how she used to make me tea when I felt bad. Like, she got this special tea from Syria and she used to make that for me whenever I felt sick. So you get a personal connection to these issues, And when you are in a classroom that is not a monolith, when you're in a classroom that is racially and ethnically diverse, you are connected to those people, you are connected to their cultures, and I feel like a sense of empathy is fostered as well. Because if you're only surrounded by people who look like you, talk like you, and act like you, you're living in a bubble and you're not going to be able to be exposed to things, to the real world. So, yeah, I think that's a really important thing to do. Coming to Eckerd was not exactly a tough decision. I never thought about, all my friends back in India were like, वहां सिर्फ गोरे लोग होंगे और तुमको वो पता होना चाहिए, which means that there's only going to be white people there and you should know that they're going to treat you differently. And I was like, I don't care. I'm going there for an education. And there's nothing wrong with, being surrounded by white people. And there isn't. I mean, sure, it was kind of weird when the first interactions that I had with people was, your English is so good. You speak really good English. Yeah, everybody in India knows at least 2 languages. You only speak English, homie? Okay. But no, I love Eckerd. And I think Eckerd has done an amazing job at fostering a sense of, community. Like, even though we might be a very, international students, and especially like POC international students are a very small community here, Eckerd has done a very good job of making us feel safe and wanted. But I think the administration could do a little bit of a better job at making us feel welcome, if that makes any sense. Because, like, yes, I understand we're a very small minority, but it would be nice to see our cultures represented and celebrated for once, Like, I'm going to be a junior soon, and some of the biggest Indian festivals have gone by without, anything. So, yeah, besides the public education thing, honestly, I think I'm not to be, not to make this all about capitalism, but I think a lot of this is actually about capitalism, because when you are living in a place that has prioritized the rat race over, you know, actual human communication, and when, you know, there's people like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates who are out there earning thousands of dollars a minute, and you have been gaslit and deluded into believing that you should be working 3 jobs a day, you know, to support yourself, and there's, you know, oh, there's immigrants who are coming in to steal your jobs and they're going to take your jobs away, and they're the ones you should get mad at, not these super rich CEOs who are profiting off of you. You should get mad at immigrants who are coming here for a better life. Unionize. So yeah, I think this is also in this whole situation of hate against Asians and hate against all POCs and stuff, it's very much rooted in bad education and also in capitalism and also in the model minority myth. Because I know that, you know, Asians and specifically Indians are held to a very high standard of being like, oh, you guys are the richest demographic and stuff like that. And I did a little bit of research. Um, I went to the Instagram account of the NRA, and I went to the comments because there was this one post about how Asian people are buying more guns. Every single comment was from some white guy saying, oh, this is why we like Asians. They're a good minority. There's no such thing like, one minority is not better than the other, and that is what we have been deluded into believing, that this is a fight amongst each other and this is a fight to, you know, keep our jobs and keep this and keep that, and there are other people trying to steal it, when no, nobody else is trying to steal your job except for like ultra rich people who don't need to be billionaires like Jeff Bezos. Yeah, I'm sorry for going off on a tangent. But yeah, so my experiences at my boarding school have taught me a lot about people and about their cultures and how we should respect them, and we should be taught about them as well, because if you're only being taught about things from an American point of view, you're going to internalize the idea that America is the best. You're going to start going around, you're going to go around thinking that your country is the epitome of, you know, is a first world country and there's nothing wrong with it, and talking ill of your country is like being anti-patriotic and stuff, which is not true. There are many other beautiful countries, several gorgeous, amazing countries in Asia, which if you learned about and if your public education system was funded well enough for you to learn about, I think people would have so much more compassion, I guess, more respect, and not just view Asians as a monolith. Oh, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Meher, so much. I remember I met you on the very first day of autumn term, and you had this sun hat on with you just swept up and you said hello, and I was like, a vision. So shout out, absolute god tier human being. Thank all of you so much. The event is not over, by the way. The event is not, unless you want to leave. Like, I'm not going to keep you here. But I saw someone say Nemo marry me in chat, and like, I'd officiate. But Fletcher, okay, yes, when I get back. We'll have a double wedding, triple wedding, whatever. We've had 2 mass shootings in the past week, which is something that hasn't happened in a while. You know, as soon as the vaccine started coming out, people started going outside. The murder started again. And I'll be the first to admit, the number of mass shootings has desensitized me over the course of my life. Out of the hundreds and hundreds of events that have happened during our lifetimes, I think there have only been 2 or 3 that have actually, you know, like deeply struck me. But the violence towards minority communities over the past year is a tragedy, but is also leading to these conversations with Black Lives Matter and Stop Asian Hate, especially after an entire year of the pandemic being blamed on China and on Asians, because you know that a racist isn't going to walk up to somebody and determine whether or not they're Chinese or Japanese before attacking them, is not going to determine, you know, how long they've lived in the United States and what their socioeconomic bracket is, how much they contribute to the economy, or whether or not they're old or young. All they're going to see is a target. And that is disgusting. And I think we're all aware of that. Over the rest of the meeting, I'm going to drop a couple of resource links into the chat for ways that we can educate ourselves. And there are 2 main points I want to make before I open the floor to whoever wants to talk about this. The first point is this, in response to May's parents, this was in fact a hate crime. You don't think it was a hate crime against Asians? Okay, it was a hate crime against women. You don't think it was a hate crime against women? Okay, it was a hate crime against, you know, objects of lust, which for the perpetrator was most definitely Asian women. It's the fact that that man was defended and they said he had a bad day. I'm sure all of us on this call have had some bad days that did not end in committing mass murder. That did not end, even if we have access to guns, did not end in us using them. So it's been too long of excuses being made for people. I am strongly against police brutality. However, there are times where I wonder why it's not being targeted at people who walk out of a school or a grocery store or something after having killed people, and why it is targeted at someone that's maybe carrying a counterfeit 20 or a bag of candy or something like that. If a police officer has that rage and that violence, they can use it for something that deserves it. And I'm not condoning police brutality. I'm just saying that if there's going to be police responding to events, they should choose their actions wisely. And the final thing that I'm going to say is the reason that we're running this event and not a club that's dedicated to Asian people is running this event is because we couldn't find one at Eckerd. So if you know anyone that wants to start that club chartering is happening within the next week or so, I believe, couple of weeks. Maybe something to think about for people on this call, or if you don't want to do it, find someone who does. Because I know we're going to be working with AAS in a couple of weeks on an event about the history of Black elected officials in the States, and particularly in the South. And this would have been a really good event to work with a Pan-Asian association on, if we were able to find one. There is a Japanese culture club, but I was pretty sure that was Weebs. And not representative of the Eckerd Asian community. Oops. So with my last moment, I would like to ask those of us who are religious to take a moment, and for those, and pray, and for those of us that aren't, to take a moment and think about the action that we're going to take over the next few days, over the next year, over the rest of our lives, to take action on the issues that we talked about here tonight.